The Pixel 4a was somehow the cheapest Pixel release at $350 which at the time was less than half the cost of the Pixel 4. It was insane that the Pixel 4 was $800 with the Pixel 8 being $700 right now. Either way, the Pixel 4a is no longer new and replaced with the Pixel 6a, price-wise at least. But when you search the used market, this sits at about the same price as the Pixel 4, which begs the question, is the Google Pixel 4a even worth buying? Hello everyone, this is Matt from Real World Review, and today we will decide if the budget phone is better than the Pixel 4. Now clearly that is a joke. The Pixel 4 is a better phone while the Pixel 4a is a budget phone. Kind of mid-range, but budget phone. Normally I would call it a day and actually agree, but there are some benefits that, well, no newer Pixels have. While the Pixel 5 comes close to the Pixel 4a as almost the smallest Pixel, the original Pixel is actually barely shorter and the same weight as the 4a at 143 grams. That said, there's no reason for you to use the original Pixel compared to the 4a. So technically, that makes the Google Pixel 4a the smallest Pixel that you can buy. As for the materials, the front is Gorilla Glass 3, but the back is not. Google instead went with the budget-feeling plastic, which somewhat helps with durability. Actually, that's kind of debatable seeing that it's pure plastic on the back and not lined with a metal frame like the iPhone 5C was. Also, the screen is comically expensive to replace, ironically costing about double the cost of the flexible OLED panel found in the Pixel 4, which should not be the case given that the Pixel 4a's OLED panel is not flexible. It is also a 60Hz display, which is fair for the phone, but match this with a Snapdragon 730G chip and the phone just feels slow. RAM is not an issue though, being 6GB, and storage is fair as well, being 128GB of UFS 2.1 storage, or twice the storage and about 50% more RAM when compared to the 2022 iPhone SE. So performance-wise, not the worst, but about 50 to 75% slower than the Pixel 4, which can be found around the same price. There are some more budget aspects, if we can really call them that could sway your decision. On the back, plastic, sure. But we do get the fingerprint scanner, which is low-key really nice to use. Swiping down to see notifications and immediately being in the phone when you pick up the phone is always nice. I would choose this over only having Face Unlock, and no, my iPhone does not have a password on it, so I'm not contradicting myself. My computer has Touch ID, because Mac. Either way, there is a headset jack on the top, which I do not really care about, but I did actually use it a few times. I actually got into a car with a USB-C iPhone and this phone, and this was the only phone that was able to play wired music. Daily tasks are fine. We got Android 13 on this phone with no more updates coming in, at least not planned. All the apps that you want will work on here, but maybe in 3+ years they might not. One aspect of this phone that borders on budget is the camera. I'm here to tell you yes, this is a budget camera, or at least now it is. See, the thing is that this does beat most modern budget cameras like the Motorola Moto G Stylus or arguably the Nothing Phone 1, but its capabilities, processor, and viewfinder don't help, with image processing being almost removed from this phone. The main 12.2 megapixel camera by itself is awesome, lacking laser autofocus, but still having autofocus and optical image stabilization. Shooting 4K at 30 frames per second is the max that you get out of this camera, but at least it is optically stabilized. Don't get me wrong, the images aren't terrible, and it still has that contrasty look that Pixel phones have, but falls apart when it gets darker or overall doesn't focus on much outside of the main subject. And then the front camera is a strange 8 megapixel sensor. Good for video calls, I would say, but the glare is strange. I'm not sure if this is happening because I've had the glass replaced, but it just does not look good on my eyes. And those are the two cameras on this phone, which is neither good or bad considering the base price and the release date of this phone. There's technically some more budget aspects that I don't prefer on this phone, but I'll explain that later. With all that said, I think the next subject for this phone is premium, which doesn't really make sense at first. This $350 launch price phone is an A-series phone, literally a Pixel phone that's made cheaper for those that don't want to spend a lot of money or can't afford the flagships. But that's a strange thing. If you go on T-Mobile's website right now, the first cheap phone that you can find with an OLED screen is the Samsung A54 5G at $450. Well, the 4A at $350 has a smaller and lower refresh rate screen, sure, but it's still a 1080p OLED panel. Honestly, this feels like a slightly dimmer Samsung S10e screen, being 5.8 inches, 1080p, and having that hole punch for the front camera in the corner. But the image looks good. I don't have an issue with it at least. We get the amazing Google version of the always-on display, as well as tap to wake, which is nice to see and fairly uncommon on budget phones, even with the OLED panels. The screen is small, but that's because the phone is small, which is pretty rare nowadays. The S10e would technically be better in many ways, but the 4a not only runs stock Android, but all the way up to Android 13, while the S10e is on Android 12 forever. It is sad that software updates have ended, but Android 14 and 15 would probably end up being too much for this phone. While the phone is plastic on the back and glass on the front, I'm surprised in the feel and the sound. The vibrating mechanism is a round one, but for some reason actually gives that premium feel that we get in phones like the Pixel 3 and Pixel 4. I remember the Pixel 3a vibrating motor just felt really cheap. The speakers, while not the best quality, are dual stereo sets and sound loud for the size. I would say a step under the iPhone mini speakers, but still really awesome to see. And of course, we still get the headset jack. There's no wireless charging on this phone, but the charging port does allow for 18 watts of fast charging into that 3140 milliamp cell, which is ironically larger than the Google Pixel 4. And the port on the bottom is USB-C 3.1, something I didn't really believe until I read it. It actually turns out that the only Pixels that used USB 2.0 were the Pixel 3a and 3a XL. The more you know. Hey look, the title is the thing. On paper, this phone is not it. In 2020, it was good value at $350, which competed with the $399 iPhone SE 2020 and the $400 Samsung A51 4G. While all three of those phones have 4G, the Pixel 4a actually ended up being the best bang for your buck, in my eyes. The processor is easily beat by the iPhone SE, but battery life is superior on the Pixel 4a, even in size and age, and yes, the processor is faster than the A51, just not the 5G version. That said, the A51 5G processor is barely faster than the Pixel 4a. I would also say that the Pixel version of Android is definitely smoother than the One UI that Samsung uses. Then for the camera, the A51 and other multi-cam phones have multiple cameras and high megapixels to lean on, but the iPhone SE and Pixel 4a will produce higher quality photos and videos even from the front camera. Something strange happened when I would use this phone daily. I actually liked it. The phone is essentially a no-frills experience, which is not a bad thing. Sure, the processor definitely isn't the fastest that I've used, but it does the job for when I need to get work done. The screen really is more than enough, though the phone feels slow thanks to that 60Hz display and my brain being tainted by 90 and 120Hz panels over the years. The size, weight, and overall usability of the phone actually lets me think that this is a worthy phone, still. And of course, the Samsung S10e is similarly priced, but the phone does have some downsides to it. The Pixel 4a is a strange one. Replacement screens are pretty expensive, there's no water resistance or wireless charging, though the former would probably be gone by now if it did have that. The 4a isn't the fastest phone out there, and is probably the slowest of the small list of phones in this size still worth buying. Everything points to this not being worth purchasing, but is still worth buying for a cheap phone. I call this a budget phone for the pricing and specs, but realistically this should be called a mid-range phone because there are some premium aging aspects, like battery life, camera, and screen, though the screen is definitely debatable. Trying to find this phone in the condition that mine is in is probably going to be difficult, but not impossible for a reasonable price. There is a problem with the memory chips failing on some Pixel 3 through Pixel 5 series, but from what I've seen the Pixel 4a is pretty resilient. Whatever you do not buy the Pixel 5a. That's just a ticking time bomb. And that's my review of the Pixel 4a. This phone in particular is special to me, being the specific phone that I bought and gave to my mom only to upgrade her phone a couple years later. I was able to do both of those things because of this channel, so thank you all for the support. I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching.